December 8, 1941, 0800 hours. Tokyo Imperial Japanese Navy Headquarters. The cigarette smoke hung thick in the underground war room, where Rear Admiral Takeshi Nakamura stood before the massive Pacific theater map, his hand trembling slightly as he held the wooden pointer against the cluster of red flags marking Pearl Harbor. 8 American battleships, Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, California, Nevada, Tennessee, Maryland, Pennsylvania, destroyed or crippled in a single morning, 2,403 Americans dead, 188 aircraft obliterated, Japanese losses laughably minimal, 64 men, 29 aircraft. The officers around him celebrated wildly, shouting toasts to the emperor, slapping backs, embracing. This was the greatest naval victory in Japanese history. The Kido Butai had accomplished what seemed impossible. America's Pacific Fleet lay shattered in shallow Hawaiian waters, burning and broken. But Nakamura couldn't shake the ice forming in his stomach as he stared at the intelligence document clutched in his other hand. Fresh analysis of American industrial capacity, numbers that made no strategic sense whatsoever. Xiaomi. Things seemed like typographical errors. United States daily oil production, 4 million barrels. Japan, 7,000 barrels. That ratio was 570 to 1. American steel production, 81 million tons annually. Japanese, 7 million tons. Ratio nearly 12 to 1. Aluminum, 600,000 tons versus 60,000. Ratio 10 to 1. And buried deep in the report, a detail everyone dismissed as irrelevant. 300 obsolete World War I-era ships anchored in Virginia's James River, rusting for 2 decades in what intelligence analysts mockingly called the ghost fleet. Worthless scrap metal, scheduled for eventual dismantling. American bureaucratic waste, typical of their inefficient democracy. Nakamura's colleagues laughed when he mentioned it. One captain literally spat on the floor. Americans keep museum pieces while we build modern warships. This proves their decadence, their inability to make hard decisions. But something gnawed at Nakamura's trained analytical mind. What if those ships weren't museum pieces? What if America saw potential where Japan saw only rust? What if sleeping giant everyone talked about wasn't sleeping at all, but merely waiting for excuse to awaken? By to the window overlooking Tokyo Bay, where the rising sun painted the water blood red below him. The city celebrated with fireworks and parades. Victory euphoria sweeping the nation like typhoon. But Nakamura remembered his time as naval attaché in Washington, D.C., 1937 to 39. Walking past massive factories in Detroit, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, seeing the casual abundance, the waste that shocked him. Americans throwing away food that would feed Japanese families for a week. Driving automobiles individually when trains served perfectly well. Operating factories 24 hours daily, producing consumer goods, refrigerators, radios, washing machines with efficiency that seemed impossible. He'd written reports then, warning about American industrial potential. Reports filed and ignored because they contradicted the narrative Japanese leadership wanted to hear. America was weak, decadent, divided, incapable of sustained warfare. Their mongrel population of immigrants and minorities could never match pure Yamato spirit. Japanese warriors would triumph through superior will, superior training, superior dedication. But numbers don't lie. Mathematics has no ideology, and arithmetic of this war looked increasingly terrifying. Crosby turned back to the map, traced his finger across the Pacific, from Tokyo to Pearl Harbor, to the American West Coast, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, and further inland to places Japanese planners barely considered. Detroit's automobile factories capable of producing thousands of vehicles monthly. What happened when those assembly lines switched to tanks and aircraft? Pittsburgh's steel mills that made girders for skyscrapers. What happened when they forged armor plate and gun barrels? Boeing's aircraft factory in Seattle, already building bombers in peacetime. What happened with unlimited wartime budgets and around-the-clock shifts? And that ghost fleet sitting in James River near Fort Eustis, Virginia. 300 ships from the Great War, Hog Island Emergency Fleet Corporation, Vessels built using mass production techniques Japan never mastered. Standard designs, modular construction, welding instead of riveting. Revolutionary methods that horrified traditional shipbuilders but produced results. American shipyards had constructed ships faster than German submarines could sink them. 1917 to 1918. That war, America entered late, yet built 2.7 million tons of shipping in 18 months, eclipsing all other nations combined. What if they did it again? What if Pearl Harbor didn't cripple America, but enraged her? Nakamura had read American history during his Washington posting, studied their Civil War, their World War I mobilization, their Great Depression recovery through New Deal programs. One thing became clear. Americans responded to crisis, not with resignation, but with furious innovation. They built Hoover Dam during Depression, employed thousands, created an engineering marvel that seemed impossible. They constructed transcontinental railroad across hostile wilderness in 6 years. They went from agricultural backwater to industrial superpower in 3 decades. When Americans decided something must be done, they possessed resources, will, and organizational capacity to accomplish miracles that left other nations stunned. And now Japan had attacked them directly, killed thousands of their young men, burned their ships, destroyed their aircraft, given them exactly the galvanizing crisis that historically triggered American industrial fury. Nakamura felt cold certainty settling over him like winter fog. They hadn't won war this morning. They had started countdown to their own destruction. Delusion ran deep through every level of Japanese command structure based on decade of propaganda and carefully curated intelligence that confirmed existing prejudices rather than challenging them. Nakamura pulled his personal files from locked cabinet in his small office, away from celebrating crowds, reviewing reports he'd compiled over years, documents that painted very different picture than official narrative. Accepted American weakness as gospel truth. Japanese military intelligence assessment from 1939 stated clearly, Americans are nation of shopkeepers and jazz musicians, lacking warrior spirit necessary for modern warfare. Their mongrel racial composition prevents unit cohesion. Their democracy encourages weakness and indecision. Their soldiers fight for money, not honor. They will collapse when faced with disciplined Japanese forces willing to die for emperor. These weren't fringe opinions. These were mainstream beliefs taught at Imperial Japanese Naval Academy, printed in training manuals, repeated by senior officers who should have known better. Admiral Yamamoto, who studied at Harvard and served as naval attaché in Washington, had warned that attacking America was folly, that Japan would run wild for 6 months, perhaps a year, before American industrial might crush them. But even Yamamoto underestimated the speed and scale of American response. BREDS, Japanese strategic planning assumes specific timeline. Attack Pearl Harbor, cripple Pacific Fleet, simultaneously seize Philippines, Guam, Wake Island, Hong Kong, Malaya, Dutch East Indies, Singapore. Establish defensive perimeter across Pacific, including Marshall Islands, Wake, Marianas, Carolines, New Guinea. Fortify these positions with aircraft and naval forces, then wait for American counterattack, which would be defeated through superior Japanese training tactics and fighting spirit. After 2 or 3 costly defeats, American public would demand peace negotiations. Japan would offer generous terms. Keeping most conquests, America would accept, because democracies lack stomach for prolonged warfare, expensive in blood and treasure. This strategy worked perfectly on paper, made complete sense given Japanese assumptions about American character and capabilities, but it rested on foundation of catastrophic miscalculations about American industrial capacity, national resolve, and ability to innovate under pressure. Japanese planners estimated America might build 2 or 3 major warships monthly during wartime, perhaps 50 to 75 significant vessels annually. This seemed generous estimate given American peacetime construction rates. Bluebland. They completely missed revolutionary preparations already underway since 1940. Maritime Commission established emergency shipbuilding program. Contracts awarded to companies that never built ships before. Revolutionary, Industrialist named Henry Kaiser, dam builder with zero shipbuilding experience, received massive contracts because he understood something traditional shipbuilders didn't. Modern construction was about moving massive amounts of material quickly, efficiently, using innovative techniques that reduced time and cost. Kaiser had built Hoover Dam ahead of schedule, under budget, by breaking project into standardized modules, using specialized crews for specific tasks, employing new equipment and methods that old-timers declared impossible. Now he proposed applying same principles to ships, building them like automobiles or dams in prefabricated sections, welded together rather than riveted. Traditional shipbuilders laughed, said it couldn't be done, insisted ships required craftsmen with years of training working slowly, carefully, riveting each plate by hand. Kaiser ignored them, started hiring workers, training them in weeks for specialized tasks, created assembly line shipbuilding that seemed absurd until it worked spectacularly. Brubs. Japanese intelligence completely missed this development because it seemed impossible. By their standards, Japanese shipbuilding remained traditional craft learned through apprenticeship, taking years to master building each ship as individual project, requiring 18 months minimum for destroyer, 2 years for cruiser, 5 years for battleship. Japanese naval architects took pride in craftsmanship, in attention to detail, in beautiful welds and perfect fits. This was proper way to build warships. Anything else was cutting corners, producing inferior products that would fail in combat. American welded ships would crack. Japanese experts confidently predicted American mass production would create quantity without quality, ships that looked impressive but broke down quickly. Japanese submarines would sink them easily. This comfortable delusion persisted because alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. What if American industrial methods actually worked? What if quantity had its own quality? What if mass production could create good enough ships fast enough that quality differences became irrelevant? What if America could build ships faster than Japan could sink them? Ingredienting. Was Ghost Fleet sitting in James River near Fort Eustis, Virginia? Those 300 rusting hulks from Great War, Hog Island ships, concrete ships, emergency construction from 1917 to 1919, when America built shipping faster than German U-boats could destroy it after armistice. These ships weren't needed, mothballed, anchored in rows along river, allowed to rust, theoretically preserved for future emergency. But decades of neglect left them looking like maritime graveyard. Japanese reconnaissance photographs from 1940 showed corroded hulls, seized engines, missing equipment, birds nesting in smokestacks. Americans themselves called it Ghost Fleet, seemed appropriate. These were ghosts of previous war, technological anachronisms from era before modern naval aviation, before advanced fire control, before welded construction. Japanese intelligence analysts wrote detailed report, 1938, declaring Ghost Fleet completely worthless, impossible to reactivate within reasonable time frame. If America needed ships, they would have to build new ones, which would take years. By then, war would be over. Japan would have won. This assessment seemed logical, reasonable, based on Japanese understanding of ship repair and maintenance. But assessment was wrong, catastrophically wrong, because it failed to account for American approach to problems. American engineers didn't ask whether something was proper or traditional. They asked whether it worked, whether it could be done faster, cheaper, more efficiently. Ghost Fleet ships weren't pristine, but they were fundamentally sound. Hulls, intact, engines, rebuildable, systems, replaceable with modern equipment. American shipyards already swamped with new construction contracts didn't want reactivation job, but Maritime Administration ordered it anyway. December 1941, days after Pearl Harbor, reactivation accelerated. Emergency priority. 300 ships moved from storage to repair facilities. Crews of workers swarmed over them, cutting away rust, replacing pipes, rewiring electrical systems, installing new engines, updated equipment. Process that should have taken years would take months. American industrial capacity applied to resurrection of dead fleet. Simultaneously, America was building new ships faster than anyone thought possible, while reactivating old ships everyone thought worthless. This two-front shipbuilding campaign would produce naval avalanche that would bury Japan under sheer tonnage. But in December 1941, Japanese leadership celebrated victory, completely unaware of industrial tsunami gathering strength across Pacific. Redskins, April 18, 1942. 4 months after Pearl Harbor changed everything, Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle led 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers off carrier Hornet's deck, accomplishing feat aviation experts declared impossible. Medium bombers too large for carrier operations, launching anyway, bombing Tokyo, Yokohama, Kobe, Nagoya. First attack on Japanese home islands. War. Psychological impact vastly exceeded military damage. Tokyo citizens who'd been assured American forces were crushed, retreating in disarray. Suddenly watching American bombers overhead, dropping explosives, starting fires, proving Japanese air defenses couldn't protect homeland, proving ocean wasn't barrier, proving America could strike back. Japanese military leadership scrambled to explain how this happened. Intelligence failure, planning failure, defensive failure. But deeper question haunted thinking officers. How did Americans improvise impossible solutions so quickly? Bombers weren't designed for carrier operations. Americans modified them, trained crews, executed mission anyway. This improvisational innovation, this refusal to accept limitations, was very American. Trait that Japanese rigid military doctrine couldn't match. Nakamura read reports, saw photographs of bomb damage. Minimal but symbolic significance, enormous. Americans weren't defeated, weren't demoralized, weren't negotiating, they were attacking. Reddit, May 7 through 8, 1942. Battle of Coral Sea. First naval engagement where opposing fleets never saw each other, fighting entirely with carrier aircraft. Japanese forces attempted to capture Port Moresby, New Guinea, extend defensive perimeter, threaten Australia. American carriers Lexington and Yorktown intercepted them. Fierce, two-day battle resulted. Japanese lost light carrier Shoho, fleet carrier Shokaku, heavily damaged, Zuikaku's air group decimated. Americans lost Lexington, Yorktown damaged. Tactical draw, perhaps slight Japanese advantage in ships sunk, but strategic defeat for Japan. Port Moresby invasion canceled. First-time Japanese offensive halted. More disturbing intelligence intercepts suggested Americans were reading Japanese naval codes. How long had they been reading Japanese communications? How many operations were compromised? Nakamura requested investigation. Met. Stonewall. Nobody wanted to admit codes might be broken. That would mean changing entire communication system. Massive disruption. Better to assume codes were secure, continue operations. But nagging doubt remained. What if Americans knew Japanese plans in advance? What if surprise attacks weren't surprising? Remember, then June 4 through 7, 1942. Midway catastrophe that changed Pacific War. Admiral Yamamoto's plan. Brilliant trap. American carriers near Midway. Destroy them. Eliminate American naval aviation capability. Japan would dominate Pacific. But Americans knew Japanese plan. New force composition. New timing. New target. Codebreakers at Station Hypo. Pearl Harbor decrypted enough messages to give Admiral Nimitz complete picture. Japanese forces approaching Midway walked into ambush. American dive bombers caught 4 Japanese carriers with aircraft. Rearming, bombs and torpedoes scattered across hangar decks, fuel lines open. 5 minutes of devastating attacks. Sank Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, later Hiryu. All 4 fleet carriers lost, with most experienced pilots and crews. Irreplaceable veterans who'd perfected tactics at Pearl Harbor. Philippines, East Indies, Coral Sea, gone in single day. Japan started war with 10 fleet carriers, now had 6. America started with 7 fleet carriers, lost 4, but was building more. Lots more. Nakamura received preliminary casualty reports, felt physically ill. 3,000 trained aircrew lost, including irreplaceable veterans. American losses: 1 carrier, Yorktown, 1 destroyer, about 300 men. Blind. But Yorktown's story itself was disturbing. She'd been heavily damaged at Coral Sea month earlier. Japanese intelligence estimated 3 months minimum repair time, probably 6 months. At West Coast Shipyard instead, Yorktown limped into Pearl Harbor, where 1,400 workers swarmed over her. 72 hours later, she sailed to Midway, patched sufficiently to operate aircraft. Japanese planners had assumed she'd be unavailable, calculated American strength based on that assumption. Wrong. Americans accomplished 72-hour miracle. That seemed impossible when Japanese carrier Shokaku suffered similar damage, required months of repair at Kure Naval Arsenal. Why could Americans repair so much faster? Was it superior damage control, training, better shipyard facilities, more resources? All of above. Nakamura studied comparison carefully, realized American approach was fundamentally different. Japanese repairs aimed to restore ship to pristine condition. Everything perfect, everything according to specifications. Process took time. American repairs aimed to make ship combat effective, quickly. Cosmetic perfection didn't matter. Only fighting capability mattered. Good enough now, beat perfect later. This pragmatic philosophy extended to everything Americans did. Sunderland. Summer 1942 reconnaissance photographs arrived from agents in United States. Images that made Nakamura's blood run cold. Ghost Fleet was moving. James River. Reserve Fleet being towed to shipyards. Norfolk, Portsmouth, Baltimore, Philadelphia. Hundreds of workers cutting away rust, installing new engines, updated equipment, transforming rusting hulks into functional cargo ships, tankers, transports. Japanese intelligence assessment declared this impossible. 300 ships in various states of decay couldn't be reactivated in under 2 years, probably longer. Yet photographs showed dozens already departing to sea, heading for training areas being loaded with cargo. American efficiency exceeded Japanese projections by order of magnitude. But even more disturbing were photographs from California. Richmond shipyards belonging to Henry Kaiser, industrialist who never built ship. Before December 1940, aerial reconnaissance showed massive construction. 4 adjacent shipyards building simultaneously. Prefabricated hull sections stacked like building blocks. Giant cranes lifting modules weighing 50 tons, welding them together. Assembly line technique that looked insane but clearly worked. A Japanese naval intelligence officer stationed in Mexico obtained copy of Kaiser's production schedule through neutral contacts. Documents showed Kaiser planned to build Liberty ships, standardized cargo vessels in 60 days. Average previous American construction time was 8 to 10 months for comparable ship. 60 days seemed impossible. Typographical error, perhaps, or propaganda to intimidate Japan. But accompanying photographs showed progress. First Liberty ship, SS Patrick Henry, launched September 1941, took 194 days. Next batch under construction simultaneously. 7 ships on 7 slipways at Richmond alone, all in various stages of completion. Workers everywhere. 3 shifts, 24-hour operation. Women working alongside men. Welding, cutting, fitting, riveting, assembling. This was factory, not shipyard. Producing ships like automobiles. Standardized, interchangeable parts. Modular construction. Specialized labor. One worker trained in 3 weeks to do specific task excellently, rather than trained in 3 years to do everything adequately. Result, production speed that defied traditional shipbuilding logic. Verblued, most disturbing detail in photographs, significant percentage of workers were women. Japanese reconnaissance officer noted with disbelief, women welders, women crane operators, women doing heavy industrial labor, that Japanese society reserved exclusively for men. American mobilization included entire population, men, women, blacks, whites, immigrants, everyone contributing to war production. Japan used Korean forced labor, Chinese prisoners conquered, populations working under compulsion, producing inferior results because slaves don't innovate, don't suggest improvements, don't take initiative. America used free citizens working for wages, volunteering for war effort, taking pride in production, competing between shifts and between shipyards to set records. Kaiser Richmond Shipyard Number 2 competed against Kaiser Richmond Shipyard Number 3. Workers bet on which yard could build ship faster. Result: constant innovation, constant improvement, constant acceleration. Women trained as welders in 3 weeks became highly skilled, produced quality work indistinguishable from male welders. Sometimes better because they followed procedures more carefully. Rosie the Riveter wasn't propaganda poster. She was real phenomenon. Millions of women entering workforce replacing men gone to military, creating industrial capacity Japan couldn't match. But of 1942, evidence became overwhelming, crushing, undeniable avalanche of statistics, reports, photographs, prisoner interrogations, neutral observer accounts, all painting same horrifying picture. America wasn't rebuilding military capability. America was creating entirely new category of industrial warfare that made previous conflicts look like futile skirmishes. Japanese submarine commanders reported strange phenomenon. They'd sink American cargo ship off California coast. Week later, identical ship, same class, same silhouette would pass, same location, as if first sinking hadn't mattered at all. First commanders thought they were seeing same ship, misidentified sinking. But after multiple confirmations, reality became clear. Americans were building ships faster than submarines could sink them. Japanese submarine force, most advanced in Pacific, couldn't achieve attrition rates necessary to impact American logistics because replacement construction exceeded loss rates by wide margin. This violated basic military mathematics. Attackers should eventually deplete defenders' resources if attacks continue long enough. But mathematics only works when defender has finite resources. Americans appeared to have infinite resources. Blublik. Nakamura obtained detailed intelligence report on American war production. First half, 1942. Figures seemed impossible. Checked them 3 times against multiple sources. All confirmed. Liberty ships completed 88 vessels. 6 months average construction time cut from 194 days to 145 days. Still dropping. Kaiser Richmond yards building ships in 90 days. Consistently aiming for 60-day average. Total American merchant ship construction, 8 million gross tons 1942. Alone for comparison, entire Japanese merchant fleet at war, start was 6 million gross tons. Americans built more merchant shipping in 1 year than Japan possessed total, and naval construction equally staggering. 8 fleet carriers, 16 escort carriers, dozens of cruisers, destroyers, submarines. American shipyards operated at capacity, unprecedented in naval history, employing over 1 million workers, producing warships faster than any nation ever achieved. Japan built 32 military vessels, same 6-month period, ratio 4-to-1, favoring America. And gap was widening. Black. Aircraft production, comparison even worse. American aircraft factories produced 35,000 military aircraft, first half 1942. Japanese production, 4,500 aircraft, ratio 8-to-1. But raw numbers didn't tell complete story. American aircraft were getting better, heavier, better armed, better equipped with radios, navigation equipment, armor protection systems. Japanese aircraft remained light, maneuverable, lightly armed, reflecting philosophy that pilot skill mattered more than aircraft capability. This worked early war, when Japanese pilots had 500 to 800 hours training versus American pilots with 200 hours. But by mid-1942, American pilot training expanded dramatically. New pilots receiving 400 hours before combat assignment, while Japanese training contracted due to fuel shortages, instructor losses, new Japanese pilots entering combat with 60 to 90 hours training, barely able to fly straight, let alone fight effectively. American quantitative advantage was becoming qualitative advantage too. More aircraft, better trained pilots, better equipment, better logistics, better everything. Reddit. Most disturbing intelligence came from German sources through diplomatic channels. German military attaché in United States sent detailed reports to Berlin, copied to Tokyo, describing American industrial capacity that exceeded Axis combined production by factor of 10 or more. One report described visit to Willow Run facility outside Detroit, Ford Motor Company factory building B-24 Liberator bombers. Facility covered 67 acres under single roof, largest factory building in world. Employed 42,000 workers operating 24 hours daily, producing one complete four-engine heavy bomber every 63 minutes. Peak production, 1.5 million parts in each aircraft, assembled like automobiles on moving production line. Workers specialized in single task, performed it hundreds of times daily, achieving speed, accuracy, impossible with traditional craft methods. German attaché concluded, report, Americans have transformed warfare from military contest into industrial process. They are mass-producing victory. We are handcrafting defeat. Gradient Kaiser shipyards represented perfect symbol of warfare. November 1942. Kaiser Richmond Shipyard No. 2 launched SS Robert E. Peary, Liberty ship, built start to finish in 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes, shattering all previous records. This was publicity stunt, obviously. Workers trained specifically for this ship worked around clock, extra crews brought in, prefabrication maximized, not sustainable pace, but it proved concept, demonstrated absolute ceiling of American productive capacity. Japanese intelligence analysts studying photographs tried to dismiss it as propaganda trick. Americans staged fake launching, rearranged sections from different ships, made it look like single ship construction. But investigation confirmed it was real. One ship, 4 days, 15 hours actual construction. Every weld inspected, every system tested. Ship sailed to Pacific, carried cargo, fought entire war, survived. Demonstrated. Quality wasn't sacrificed for speed. Normal Kaiser production averaged 42 days per ship. Still incredible. Still unprecedented. Still utterly beyond Japanese capacity to match. Technology represented key American advantage. Traditional shipbuilding used riveting, hammering metal rivets through overlapping plates to join them together. Required skilled labor, took immense time, produced ships that leaked, initially until rivets seated properly. American shipbuilders switched to welding, melting metal to fuse plates directly. Faster, stronger, completely watertight. Required less skill. Could be taught in 1 week versus 6 months for riveting. Japanese naval architects insisted welded ships would crack under stress. Pointed to several early American welded ships that did crack due to poor welding technique or improper steel formulation. Americans fixed problems, improved welding procedures, developed better steel formulations, continued welding. Each Liberty ship required 47 miles of welds, completed by workers trained in days, producing results good as traditional riveters. Japanese shipyards continued riveting because tradition demanded it, because changing would admit Americans were right. Unacceptable loss of face. Meanwhile, American welders produced ships faster, cheaper, better. Another example where Japanese pride prevented adoption of superior methods. Modular condition represented even bigger revolution. Traditional shipbuilding constructed vessel, sequentially, up frame, adding plates deck by deck, working linearly. One section completed before next section started. Kaiser method built ship in large prefabricated modules. 50-ton sections constructed separately in specialized assembly areas, then lifted by giant cranes and welded into place like giant building blocks. This allowed parallel construction, dozens of work crews building different modules simultaneously instead of sequentially. One crew working on bow section, while another worked on stern section, while third worked on deckhouse, all at same time. When modules completed, they were assembled rapidly like puzzle pieces. Result, massive time savings. Ship that took 8 months. Traditional method took 6 weeks. Kaiser method. Japanese observers watching from distance couldn't believe it worked. Assumed Americans were cutting corners, building defective ships, waiting for catastrophic failures that never came. Liberty ships crossed Pacific repeatedly. endured storms, combat damage, kept sailing. By Redskins by summer 1943, Nakamura's calculations led him to conclusion that was simultaneously obvious and unacceptable. Japan had already lost war mathematically. Outcome determined by industrial arithmetic, not military tactics, not warrior spirit, not strategic brilliance. Simple production capacity, numbers that couldn't be argued, disputed, or wished away. He sat alone in small logistics office, Yokosuka Naval Base, where he'd been exiled after superiors tired of his pessimistic assessments, surrounded by reports and statistics, doing calculations that sealed Japan's fate in cold mathematical certainty. Took blank sheet of paper, wrote down basic numbers. United States shipbuilding capacity, 1943, 110 vessels, monthly. Japan, 7 vessels, monthly. Ratio, 15.7 to 1. United States aircraft production, 6,000 monthly. Japan, 750 monthly. Ratio, 8 to 1. United States oil production, 1944, projected 1.8 billion barrels annually, 60% of world production. Japan, 5.2 million tons. Entire war, less than 1%. American production, steel production, 21 million tons annually versus 2 million. Aluminum production, 10 to 1 advantage. Ingredients. These weren't estimates or propaganda. These were hard numbers, confirmed through multiple intelligence sources, neutral country trade statistics, captured documents, prisoner interrogations, aerial reconnaissance, physical observation. Mathematics didn't lie, couldn't be spun or reinterpreted. 15 to 1 production advantage meant for every ship Japan built, America built. 15 for every aircraft Japan produced, America produced 8. And American losses were being replaced while Japanese losses were permanent. Japan started war with 183 combat vessels by mid-1943, down to 142, after losses at Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, Midway, Guadalcanal. Meanwhile, America started war with 347 combat vessels, now had over 600, and growing rapidly every month. Gap widened. American production exceeded losses. Japanese losses exceeded production. Simple subtraction showed Japanese fleet shrinking, American fleet expanding. Trajectories diverging toward inevitable conclusion. Total American naval supremacy versus complete Japanese naval extinction. Subute. Nakamura wrote detailed classified assessment titled Strategic Situation Analysis, June 1943. Marked it Most Secret Eyes Only. Submitted it through proper channels to Naval General Staff. Waited for response. 3 days later summoned to office of Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, Director of Naval Intelligence. Nakamura entered office, stood at attention, expected discussion of his findings. Instead, Fukudome held up Nakamura's report over ceramic ashtray, struck match, set paper on fire, watched it burn to ash, never taking eyes off Nakamura. When last ember died, Fukudome spoke quietly. "You are ill. Combat fatigue, mental exhaustion. You will take immediate medical leave. 30 days. These statistics are American propaganda designed to demoralize Japanese forces. Our spirit is invincible. We fight until victory. Our warriors cannot be defeated by American factories. You are dismissed from Intelligence Division, effective immediately. Transferred to administrative logistics duties. We do not need accountants in war room. We need samurai. Now get out." Homeland left office in days, reassigned to menial logistics paperwork in Yokosuka, but intelligence reports continued to arrive through back channels from colleagues who still trusted his analysis. Each report confirmed his worst projections. September 1943, intelligence summary showed American production. First, 8 months of year, 386 Liberty ships completed, 92, Victory ships improved, faster design, 48, fleet and light carriers, 22, battleships and cruisers, 134 destroyers, 78 submarines. Total merchant tonnage, 15 million gross tons. 8 months. Japan, Same period. Built 41 military vessels. Total. Comparison was beyond embarrassing. It was apocalyptic. But what broke something inside Nakamura was photograph that arrived October 1943. Aerial reconnaissance image of Kaiser Richmond shipyards, taken by long-range Japanese reconnaissance aircraft launched from submarine. ABSU. Ubisoft showed 4 adjacent shipyards, all Kaiser facilities, along Richmond, California waterfront. Nakamura counted ships under construction. 49 vessels, simultaneously, in various stages of completion, in single photograph. 49 ships. He counted 3 times to be certain. Couldn't believe eyes. Japan's entire combined fleet consisted of 142 combat vessels. This single photograph showed 1/3 that number under construction at one location. Just 4 of Kaiser's 7 total shipyards. Someone calculated, if Kaiser maintained this pace, he personally would build more tonnage in 1 year than entire Japanese shipbuilding industry had built in previous decade. One man, one company with 7 shipyards, outproducing entire Japanese empire. This wasn't military defeat. This was civilizational inadequacy. This was proof that Japanese industrial development had failed. That nation's entire approach to manufacturing and production was obsolete. That samurai spirit meant nothing when facing assembly line efficiency. Nakamura stared at photograph for hours into night after his colleagues left office alone with desk lamp, and undeniable evidence of Japanese doom. Photograph showed more than just ships. It showed American method. Each shipyard had massive cranes lifting prefabricated sections. Each had assembly areas where modules were constructed. Each had storage yards with hundreds of sections awaiting installation. This wasn't shipbuilding. This was industrial production. Shipbuilding, as understood by Japanese, meant craftsmen carefully constructing vessels over many months, ensuring perfection. American approach meant workers rapidly assembling standardized modules, ensuring adequate functionality. Perfection wasn't goal. Operational capability was goal. Speed trumped beauty. Quantity exceeded quality. And in war of attrition, quantity has quality all its own. 49 ships in one photograph represented more hulls than Japan could build in 6 months. One facility outproducing entire Japanese shipbuilding establishment. His private diary entry, October 15, 1943, captured despair. I have calculated date Japan loses war mathematically, based on current production rates, resource availability, territorial control, and replacement capacity. Japan can sustain current operations approximately 21 months from today. After that, Imperial Navy ceases to exist as effective fighting force. Not due to cowardice, not due to incompetence, due to arithmetic, because cannot fight factories with fortitude, cannot battle production with patriotism, cannot defeat assembly lines with attitude. War is over. Everyone still fighting simply doesn't know yet. Americans transformed warfare from contest of courage into contest of capacity, from test of honor into test of tonnage, from battle of spirits into battle of statistics, and statistics always win. Cannot argue with mathematics, cannot debate with production numbers, cannot wish away industrial reality. 15-1 advantage means defeat is certain. Only question is when, not whether. One more time to warn superiors. Prepare detailed briefing for Admiral Toyota, Commander-in-Chief Combined Fleet, showing production comparisons, territorial analysis, resource calculations, oil shortage projections, pilot training deficit statistics, all pointing to same inevitable conclusion. Japan must negotiate peace immediately. While still holding defensive positions within 6 months, positions would collapse within 12 months. Fleet would be combat ineffective within 18 months. Homeland would face invasion. Request meeting denied. Report returned unopened with note. Defeatism will not be tolerated. Focus on assigned logistics duties. Stop sending unsolicited strategic assessments. You are intelligence officer no longer. Your opinions are not welcome. Nakamura filed report in personal papers. Stopped trying to warn anyone. Accepted that Japan would fight until mathematical inevitability forced surrender. that millions would die because leadership refused to accept uncomfortable arithmetic, that honor would demand continuation of hopeless war until honor itself was destroyed by reality. 1944 represented peak of American industrial dominance, absolute heating in human history. Total war economy, firing on all cylinders. 150 million people mobilized for single purpose. Defeat of Axis powers. Industrial statistics from this year read like science fiction. Total merchant ship production, 19 million gross tons, more than 100 ships launched monthly. Sustained rate every 3 days, enough tonnage to transport entire Army division. Kaiser Richmond shipyards alone produced 409 ships this year, more than entire Japanese naval construction program since 1937. One company, one industrialist, who never saw a ship before December 1940, exceeded decade of Japanese Imperial Navy construction. This single fact summarized entire Pacific War outcome. Industrial capacity mattered more than martial tradition. Production schedules mattered more than warrior codes. Assembly lines defeated aircraft carriers. Naval construction equally staggering. 22 new fleet carriers commissioned, including Essex-class ships. Larger, faster, more capable than anything Japan possessed. 93 escort carriers, built from merchant hulls using Kaiser methods, converting cargo ships to small carriers in 60 days, providing air cover for convoys, hunting submarines, supporting amphibious landings, creating naval aviation capability so vast it covered Pacific like blanket. Japanese reconnaissance pilots reported with disbelief seeing horizons filled with American ships. Dozens of carriers, hundreds of destroyers, thousands of landing craft. Task forces so large they took hours to pass. Single observation point. This wasn't Navy, this was Armada. This was naval power on scale, never seen before or since. Combining mass production with technological sophistication, creating force that could absorb losses that would cripple other nations, and continue operations without pause. Aircraft production reached 96,000 military aircraft. 1944, 1,840 aircraft. Weekly, every week without interruption. Fighters, bombers, transports, trainers, reconnaissance planes, flying boats, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, every category simultaneously. Japanese production, same year, 28,000 aircraft, barely quarter American output. But numbers alone didn't convey full picture. American aircraft were getting heavier, more powerful, longer ranged, better equipped. Radar, fire control systems, armor protection, self-sealing fuel tanks, intercom systems between crew members, navigation equipment that allowed all-weather operations. Meanwhile, Japanese aircraft remained largely unchanged from 1941. Designs still prioritizing maneuverability over protection, speed over range, reflecting philosophy that hadn't adapted to changing war reality. American industrial philosophy was continuous improvement. Each production batch incorporated lessons from combat feedback, resulting in aircraft that got progressively better, while Japanese aircraft remained static due to limited industrial capacity for redesign. ADMIR. Employment statistics showed scale of mobilization. Shipyards employed 1.5 million workers. Aircraft plants, 2 million workers. Steel mills, 1.1 million workers. Ammunition plants, 800,000 workers. Total war production employment, 13 million workers, including 6 million women. Replacing men serving in military. This represented 20% of entire adult workforce dedicated solely to military production. Not counting agriculture, not counting civilian manufacturing, not counting service industries. 20% of working-age Americans building weapons, vehicles, aircraft, ships, ammunition, bombs, everything needed to wage global war on two fronts simultaneously, defeating Germany and Japan, while supplying Britain, Soviet Union, China, Free French, and other allies with equipment through Lend-Lease. This was mobilization on scale previously unimaginable, democratically organized, voluntarily executed, producing results totalitarian nations achieved only through forced labor, and even then, American free workers outproduced enslaved laborers by wide margins. Tay Gulf, October 23 through 26, 1944, represented final destruction of Imperial Japanese Navy as coherent fighting force. Japan committed virtually entire remaining combined fleet, desperate attempt to destroy American invasion forces landing at Leyte, Philippines. Operation Tengo called for complex three-pronged attack. Northern force built around remaining carriers would decoy American carriers away from landing beaches, allowing two surface forces to attack transports and support vessels. Plan nearly worked. American carriers took bait, chased north, but incredible actions of destroyer escorts and escort carriers stopped Japanese center force, while Southern force was annihilated in Surigao Strait. Final results were catastrophic for Japan. 4 aircraft carriers sunk. Zuikaku, last survivor of Pearl Harbor, attack force finally destroyed. 3 battleships, including super battleship Musashi, sister ship of Yamato, sunk by 19 torpedoes, 17 bomb hits, taking 4 hours to die. 10 cruisers, 11 destroyers, over 12,000 sailors killed, representing largest single naval battle losses in Japanese history. American losses comparatively minor. 1 light carrier Princeton sunk by land-based air attack. 2 escort carriers Gambier Bay sunk by battleship gunfire. St. Lo sunk by first organized kamikaze attack. 3 destroyers, 3 destroyer escorts, approximately 3,000 casualties. But these losses were immediately replaceable. Ships already under construction at Kaiser yards and other facilities would arrive theater within 6 weeks, fully equipped, fully manned, ready for combat. Meanwhile, Japanese losses were permanent. No replacement carriers existed, no replacement battleships under construction, no reserve of trained pilots to replace thousands lost in battle. Japan's naval aviation capability effectively ended at Leyte Gulf, leaving remaining surface ships without air cover, making them vulnerable targets, unable to operate beyond range of land-based air cover, which was shrinking as America captured more islands closer to Japan. About Leyte Gulf results through logistics channels no longer having access to classified operational intelligence, but casualty lists and ship loss reports passed through his office. Requisitions for replacement, personnel, repair, parts, funeral arrangements told story of disaster. 4 carriers gone. He read list, numbering them mentally. Zuikaku number, 27, carrier lost since Pearl Harbor. Japan started war with 10 fleet carriers, built 18 total during war, lost 27 between combat losses, accidents, training losses, catastrophes, now had virtually none operational. Meanwhile, America started with 7 fleet carriers, currently operated over 100 fleet and escort carriers. Combined ratio was infinite. American carriers divided by 0, Japanese carriers equals mathematical impossibility of Japanese victory. This arithmetic was so obvious, so undeniable that continuing war seemed insane. Yet war continued because honor demanded it, because surrender was unthinkable, because admitting defeat meant admitting entire war strategy was wrong from beginning. Kamikaze tactics begun at Leyte Gulf represented ultimate admission of conventional warfare failure. Japanese pilots no longer had fuel for adequate training. New pilots arrived at units with 60 flight hours, barely able to take off and land, certainly unable to master dive bombing or torpedo attacks against violently maneuvering targets defended by walls of anti-aircraft fire. Solution was kamikaze suicide attack, flying aircraft directly into enemy ships, ensuring hit, eliminating need for accuracy or skill. This tactic horrified American forces who couldn't comprehend cultural mindset that viewed deliberate suicide as honorable. But from cold mathematical perspective, kamikaze represented efficient use of limited resources. 1 marginally trained pilot, 1 obsolete aircraft, 1 bomb equals potential American ship sunk. Initial kamikaze attacks at Leyte achieved some success, sinking St. Lo, damaging several other ships, causing disproportionate casualties relative to resources expended. Japan would employ kamikazes extensively through war's end. Ultimate symbol of desperation. Nation reduced to using men as guided missiles because couldn't produce enough aircraft or train enough pilots for conventional warfare. Brune, Abed, April 7, 1945. Final symbol of Japanese naval futility. Operation 10 Ichigo. Super battleship Yamato, sortied from Kure Naval Base with light cruiser Yahagi and 8 destroyers. Mission, sail to Okinawa, beach. Vessel fight as stationary fortress until destroyed. One-way suicide mission. Given enough fuel only for trip to Okinawa, not return. Because Japan had virtually no oil remaining. Largest battleship ever built, 72,800 tons, 9, 18.1-inch guns. Pride of combined fleet, symbol of Japanese naval power, reduced to glorified kamikaze. Unable to operate as designed, unable to fight fleet action as intended, sent on suicide mission because no other options remained. American response demonstrated overwhelming superiority. 386 aircraft from 11 fleet carriers. 11 carriers assigned to destroy 1 battleship. Such overkill. It would have been humorous if not tragic. Battle lasted 2 hours. Yamato hit by estimated 19 torpedoes. 17 bombs capsized and exploded, killing 2,498 crew. Only 280 survivors. Brilliant's symbolism was perfect. Yamato required 5 years to build, consumed resources equivalent to small city construction, employed thousands of workers, represented peak of Japanese naval engineering, thought to be unsinkable, practically indestructible, yet destroyed in 2 hours by aircraft from carriers built in months using Kaiser methods, carriers that could be replaced within 6 weeks if lost. Yamato, once lost, could never be replaced. Represented end of era, end of battleship dominance, end of Japanese naval power, end of belief that individual quality could overcome mass quantity. One perfect ship destroyed by swarm of adequate aircraft. One craftsman masterpiece defeated by assembly line products. War in microcosm. Japan brought perfection. America brought production. Perfection, lost production. 1. Mathematics defeated mythology, and Imperial Japanese Navy ceased to exist as anything more than historical memory. Augustskins, August 15, 1945. Emperor Hirohito's radio broadcast. First time most Japanese citizens heard Emperor's voice. Announced acceptance of Potsdam Declaration. Terms, unconditional surrender. War ended after 3 years, 8 months, taking millions of lives, destroying cities, eliminating Japanese military capability, reducing proud empire to occupied territory. But for Nakamura, who saw this outcome December 8, 1941, surrender brought no satisfaction, no vindication, only exhaustion and profound sadness for unnecessary deaths, from war that mathematics showed was unwinnable from beginning. He compiled final statistics in personal notebook, numbers that told complete story of industrial warfare's victory over martial tradition, triumph of production over philosophy, arithmetic over attitude. 59 final production totals, 1941 through 45. United States built total, 5,237. Military and merchant vessels combined merchant ships, 3,600. 4 vessels including 2,710 Liberty ships, 531 Victory ships, over 700 tankers, plus hundreds of specialized vessels. Total merchant tonnage, 40 million gross tons. Naval vessels, 128. Aircraft carriers all types including fleet carriers, light carriers, escort carriers, 8 battleships, 47 cruisers, 352 destroyers, 203 submarines, hundreds of smaller vessels. Total naval tonnage, approximately 8 million tons. Combined totals, 48 million tons of shipping. Built in 45 months period. This exceeded cumulative shipbuilding of all other nations in human history to that point. More tonnage than British Empire built in century. More than Germany built in 50 years. More than Japan built ever. One nation, 4 years producing half-century worth of normal shipbuilding. Japan, Final production totals 645 military vessels, all types, 18 aircraft carriers, total program, 14 lost in combat, 12 battleships, total, including pre-war ships, approximately 100 cruisers and destroyers combined. Total tonnage, approximately 4 million tons. Entire war production, ratio, 8-1, favoring America in hulls, 12-1 in tonnage, 16-1 in replacement capacity. Because American ships could be replaced, Japanese ships could not. Every sinking was permanent loss, while American sinkings were temporary inconveniences. Gap widened continuously throughout war. Mathematical inevitability of defeat was apparent to anyone willing to examine statistics honestly. Most Japanese leadership refused until atomic bombs and Soviet invasion made reality undeniable. Aircraft production comparison equally stark. United States, 300,000 plus military aircraft, all types, including 33,000 B-24 Liberators, 18,000 B-17 Flying Fortresses, 16,000 P-51 Mustangs, 12,000 F-6F Hellcats, tens of thousands of other types. Japan, 76,000 aircraft total, entire war, including obsolete trainers and utility aircraft, ratio 4-1. But actual combat capability, ratio much higher, because American aircraft were generally heavier, better armed, longer ranged, more durable. Average American fighter weighed 8,000 pounds, carried 650 caliber machine guns, had armor protection, self-sealing tanks, radar. Average Japanese fighter weighed 5,000 pounds, carried 2 machine guns, 2 cannons, no armor, minimal fuel protection, no radar, lighter, more maneuverable, early war, but increasingly obsolete as pilot quality declined and American aircraft improved. Resource comparison revealed fundamental impossibility of Japanese victory oil production. United States produced 1.8 billion barrels 1944 alone, 60% of world production. Germany produced 33 million barrels, less than 2%. American output. Japan produced 5.2 million tons entire war, approximately 40 million barrels, less than 3% of American single-year production. Steel production. United States, 21 million tons annually. Japan, 2 million tons. Aluminum, 600,000 tons versus 60,000 tons. Every strategic resource, every critical material, every essential commodity, America produced more, usually much more. Japan's only advantages early war were trained personnel, combat experience, tactical doctrine, all temporary advantages that evaporated as war progressed, while American material advantages were permanent, structural, insurmountable. Symbolized entire American approach to war, 300 World War I-era ships dismissed as worthless scrap by Japanese intelligence. All reactivated, all served throughout war, carrying supplies, transporting troops, enabling logistics that sustained island-hopping campaign ships Japan declared impossible to repair, were repaired. Ships Japan said wouldn't float, floated. Ships Japan dismissed, sailed across Pacific repeatedly, enduring storms, combat damage, mechanical failures, continuing to serve after war. Ghost Fleet refilled with surplus vessels by 1950, held 700 to 800 ships mothballed for future emergencies, proving American tendency to preserve potential resources for later use, while Japan consumed resources completely, leaving nothing in reserve. American planning assumed long war, prepared for extended conflict. Japan planned short war, gambled on quick victory. When gamble failed, had no reserves, no backup plan, no alternative strategy. Henry Kaiser's legacy extended far beyond 1,500 ships he personally built, revolutionized shipbuilding industry forever, proved modular construction worked, demonstrated welding superiority, validated assembly line techniques, showed that specialized labor trained quickly exceeded general labor trained slowly, established prefabrication as standard practice, created maritime industrial capacity America maintained through Cold War, enabling merchant marine that sustained NATO during Soviet confrontation. His methods were studied, copied, improved, became standard practice worldwide, including eventually in Japan. Post-war Japanese shipbuilding industry studied Kaiser methods, adopted them, improved them. By 1970s, Japan was world's largest shipbuilder, using techniques American innovator pioneered. Irony that Japan became shipbuilding powerhouse by learning from nation that defeated them, learning industrial lessons that could have prevented defeat if learned earlier. Brunswick. Democratic mobilization proved more effective than totalitarian coercion. 6 million American women entered workforce during war, including thousands in shipyards, aircraft plants, steel mills, doing jobs previously reserved for men. Rosie the Riveter represented real phenomenon, not just propaganda. Women welders at Kaiser Richmond comprised 13.7% production workers. By February 1943, performed quality work equal to male counterparts, sometimes superior because followed procedures more carefully, took fewer shortcuts, prioritized safety. African Americans found opportunities in defense industries previously denied them. Great migration accelerated as Southern blacks moved north and west for shipyard and aircraft factory jobs. Integration of military began slowly, hesitantly, but inevitably, creating social changes that continued post-war. Free citizens working voluntarily for wages in competitive environment produced more efficiently than slaves or conscripts working under compulsion. This validated democratic capitalism over totalitarian systems, lesson that echoed through Cold War. Nakamura's personal vindication came too late to matter. October 1945 wrote, Final Intelligence Assessment for Historical Record. Document he titled, Why Japan Lost. Final Analysis. Signed it, filed it in personal papers. Never submitted through official channels, because nobody wanted to read uncomfortable truths. Documents summarized intelligence failures, strategic miscalculations, philosophical errors that doomed Japan from war's first day. Stated clearly, war was lost, December 8, 1941. Morning after Pearl Harbor, Japanese leadership simply refused to acknowledge mathematical reality until reality forced acknowledgement through atomic fire and Soviet invasion. Argued that modern industrial warfare is won in factories before being fought on battlefields. That production capacity matters more than tactical brilliance. That democratic mobilization exceeds authoritarian coercion. That arithmetic always defeats attitude. That statistics ultimately triumph over spirit. Ended with warning for future generations. Do not fight America. They turn warfare into mathematics, and mathematics always wins. Double-double-dop. December 7, 1941. Japan looked at 8 burning battleships in Pearl Harbor and saw victory. December 7, 1946. America looked at 350 fleet and escort carriers riding at anchor and saw what victory actually was. Not moment of triumph, but accumulation of production. Not single decisive battle, but 4 years of sustained industrial output. Not tactical brilliance, but logistical arithmetic. Not warrior spirit, but welding torches. Not honor, but tonnage. Not philosophy, but factories. 3 Ghost Fleet ships dismissed as worthless rust. December 1941. Sailed throughout war, proving American resurrection capability, proving that potential matters more than current state, proving that nation which sees possibilities in ruins defeats nation which sees only ruins. These ghost ships weren't ghosts. They were prophecy. Prophecy of industrial mobilization so vast that obsolete became operational, that impossible became routine, that dismissed became decisive. Ghost Fleet, metaphor for entire American war effort, taking what seemed finished and making it functional, taking what seemed impossible and making it inevitable, taking what seemed inadequate and making it overwhelming. Kragaz, Henry Kaiser, dam builder who never built ships, produced 1,500 vessels, 27% of maritime commission tonnage, proved that innovation exceeds tradition, that new methods beat old ways, that amateur, with revolutionary approach, surpasses professional with conventional thinking. His workers, housewives, trained 3 weeks as welders, built more ships faster than Japanese craftsmen trained 3 years, built slowly, carefully, traditionally. Kaiser didn't know ships couldn't be built like automobiles, so he built them like automobiles, and it worked spectacularly. Because sometimes not knowing something is impossible is advantage that allows achieving impossible. His 4 days, 15 hours record for SS Robert E. Peary stood as ultimate proof that American industrial methods worked, that assembly line shipbuilding wasn't inferior, wasn't shoddy, wasn't temporary, expedient, but superior, permanent, revolutionary transformation of maritime industry. Battleships at Pearl Harbor became 100 end. Ratio 16 to 1. Multiplication factor that summarized entire Pacific War. Japan destroyed 8 obsolete battleships. America built 128 modern carriers, rendering battleships obsolete, making carrier warfare dominant, transforming naval combat from gun duels to aviation battles, from surface slugging matches to over-horizon strikes. Japan won yesterday's battle, attacking battleships. America built tomorrow's Navy, constructing carriers. Mathematical progression, 8 to 128, explained why attacking Pearl Harbor guaranteed Japanese defeat, not because attack failed militarily, but because galvanized American industrial response that Japan couldn't match, couldn't comprehend, couldn't survive. By aircraft from 11 carriers in 2 hours encapsulated war's entire meaning. 5 years to build, 2 hours to destroy. Greatest battleship ever constructed, eliminated by products of assembly line mass production. One irreplaceable masterpiece, defeated by replaceable factory products. One symbol of traditional craftsmanship, destroyed by symbols of industrial efficiency. Metaphor so perfect, it seemed scripted. Japan brought quality. America brought quantity. Quality lost, quantity won. This was war's ultimate lesson. Not that quality doesn't matter, but that sufficient quantity overcomes quality, that mass production of adequate weapons defeats limited production of perfect weapons, that good enough now beats perfect. Eventually, arithmetic of attrition favors producer, not perfectionist. 645 Japanese ships faced 5,000 American ships. Mathematics so stark that tactical considerations became irrelevant. Operational skill became meaningless. Strategic brilliance became futile. Cannot overcome 8 to 1 disadvantage with 8 times better training. Cannot compensate 12 to 1 tonnage deficit with 12 times stronger spirit. Cannot defeat 15 to 1 production ratio with 15 times greater determination. Mathematics doesn't care about intangibles. Arithmetic ignores morale. Statistics disregard courage. Industrial warfare. Reduced war to numbers, production schedules, capacity, calculations, resource availability. And in every calculation, America exceeded Japan by orders of magnitude. That made outcome predetermined, inevitable, inescapable. Blonde, Nakamura predicted this December 8, 1941 morning, after Pearl Harbor showed commanders mathematics of doom. Nobody listened, called him defeatist, transferred him to logistics, assignment, dismissed his warnings, ignored his statistics, rejected his conclusions, until reality forced acceptance. Through mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, vindication without satisfaction. Being right changes nothing when nobody listens. Mathematics explained outcome, but mathematics couldn't prevent tragedy, couldn't save lives, couldn't stop war. That logic showed was unwinnable from beginning. Honor demanded fighting. Courage required resistance. Tradition necessitated persistence. And 3 million Japanese died because leadership valued honor over arithmetic, courage over mathematics, tradition over reality. Ghost fleet rose from dead became armada that strangled empire, dismissed them. 300 rusting hulks became transportation network that enabled island-hopping campaign, became supply line that sustained million-man armies, became logistics backbone that made victory possible. Ghosts proved real. Japanese confidence proved phantom. American potential proved infinite. Japanese resources proved finite. Outcome was mathematical certainty. From war's first moment, anyone willing to calculate honestly could see inevitability of American victory, impossibility of Japanese success. Nakamura calculated it accurately. December 8, 1941. Took until August 15, 1945 for everyone else to acknowledge what arithmetic showed from beginning. WWI-era. Modern warfare is industrial contest, fought in factories, decided by production, won by capacity, not courage, contest of wills but comparison of assembly lines, not test of spirits, but calculation of statistics, not battle of philosophies, but measurement of manufacturing. Japan learned this lesson expensively, tragically, unnecessarily. Learned that samurai swords lose to welding torches, that warrior traditions lose to worker productivity, that honor loses to output, that spirit loses to steel, that quality loses to quantity, that craftsmanship loses to construction speed, that perfection loses to production volume, that yesterday loses to tomorrow, that feudalism loses to capitalism, that dictatorship loses to democracy, that mythology loses to mathematics. Final wasn't beginning of Japanese victory, was beginning of Japanese defeat, wasn't tactical triumph, was strategic catastrophe, wasn't smart attack, was fatal error, because it awakened industrial giant that Japan couldn't comprehend, couldn't match, couldn't defeat. 8 burning battleships seemed like victory, was actually death warrant. 300 rusting ghosts seemed like junk, was actually prophecy. Henry Kaiser seemed like amateur, was actually revolutionary. Democratic mobilization seemed like weakness, was actually strength. American production seemed like impossible, was actually inevitable. And by time Japan understood this, understanding came too late, mattered too little, changed nothing. Because mathematics had already determined outcome. Arithmetic had already written ending. Statistics had already declared victor. And ghost fleets sailing across Pacific, carrying victory in cargo holds, proved that America won war before first shot was fired by preparing to produce, faster than enemy could destroy, building capacity that exceeded need, creating redundancy that enabled resilience, demonstrating that modern war belongs not to bravest soldiers, but to most productive factories, not to finest warriors, but to fastest welders, not to greatest traditions, but to greatest assembly lines, not to strongest spirits, but to strongest economies. Brethren, mathematics won, war, arithmetic defeated, philosophy production conquered, tradition, assembly lines beat aircraft carriers, welding torches melted, warrior codes, statistics outlasted spirit, and 300 ghost ships sailed into legend, proving American way of war, industrial, overwhelming, inevitable, unstoppable, because based not on courage alone, but on capacity, not on honor alone, but on output, not on tradition alone, but on innovation, not on spirit alone, but on steel, and steel multiplied by democracy, multiplied by innovation, multiplied by production capacity, equals victory, inevitable, mathematical, certain, undeniable as gravity, as arithmetic, as ghost fleet rising from dead to sink, empire that dismissed them.